Custer, he sent a detachment of cavalry to arrest Ray in the Face, and among this detachment that went and got Ray in the Face for this murder was who? Tom Custer. And so after Ray in the Face was pointed out by an Indian scout as the guy that said these things, he was arrested, and they put him at Fort Lincoln in the jailhouse before they ever started the campaign of 1876. And Ray in the Face later escaped, and he directly blamed Tom Custer for his arrest, and he promised that he would cut the soldier's heart out and eat it if he ever ran into him again. Does that make sense? I don't know if it's true or not, but that's the story. Now, obviously, Ray in the Face many years later, after the battle was found, and they interviewed him, and he denied either killing or mutilating Tom Custer. But most people said he said that because he was afraid of the repercussions if he would admit to do that. But most people think he might have been the guy who did all that to Tom Custer. Okay, how about Boston Custer? He loses his life here. He laid downhill from Tom and George Custer. He was farther down the hill, and he was pretty close to who? That might matter.
It's where?
Audie Reed. So they both lost their lives. So Boston Custer laid downhill from, you remember they're on a hill. And so Boston Custer laid downhill from Tom and George Custer. He was pretty close to the body of Audie Reed. When you get to the battlefield, when we take this field trip, you'll see exactly where these guys fell, and their names will be on the markers. Okay, it'd be kind of cool. Well, Boston Custer was stripped. All he had on was his white cotton socks. He wasn't mutilated too bad or anything like that, but he was stripped. All he had on was white cotton socks.
Did they not know who he was? Or?
I don't think probably they did. Good question. Poor old W.W. Cook, remember him, Lieutenant Cook? He was scalped twice. How do you scalp somebody twice?
Scalp their head and scalp their brain.
Remember he had the long sideburns? They scalped his head and scalped his cheeks. Both. They also punctured Cook's right leg. Why would they puncture his leg? That's how they marked a dead enemy in those days. So Cook was scalped twice, here and here, and they punctured his right leg, which is a sign of I marked the kill. How about Keogh? He was the same as Boston Custer. He was not disfigured. He laid naked except for his socks, and he had a Catholic medal around his neck, which they left intact. Left it with him. Because they could figure out what? They could figure out that was a what? Religious symbol. Remember their feelings on religion. So Keogh was not mutilated or scalped or anything. He just lay naked with the socks on. But he left the Catholic cross that was around his neck. Okay, let's go to our next subtopic then, which is the fate of George Armstrong Custer. I can tell you what happened to him now. Okay, when they found Custer, the fate, final fate of George Armstrong Custer. Do you find this kind of interesting? I think you would. Kind of, yeah. Well, Custer, George Custer himself, was stripped naked, but he was neither scalped nor mutilated. Neither one. Okay? So he was found naked, but neither scalped nor mutilated. You will probably need to know this. He was shot twice. Once through the left side of his chest, right here, and once in the temple. Okay, he was shot twice. Once through the left side of his chest, and once in his left, excuse me, it would be his left temple, this temple here.
Do you think that he got those while fighting, or did it after he died?
I'm going to tell you.
One or two or...
Yeah.
Hard to say. So he was shot twice, once in the left side of the chest, and once in his left temple. When he was approached by the rescue party, they simply stated that he just looked like he was asleep. Looked like he was laying there naked asleep, because there wasn't blood gushing from all over. He had a couple of wounds, obviously, but they just said he just looked like he was laying there asleep. Now, Indian warriors did approach Custer to mutilate his body. They know this from Indian accounts. They did actually approach and were going to mutilate his body, but who pleaded with them to leave Custer alone? The women, the Indian women. So Indian warriors had approached Custer to mutilate his body, but the Indian women who were in the area after the battle pleaded with them to leave Custer alone. So they agreed, and all they did was they cut off part of one of Custer's fingers. Okay?
Why were the women?
Okay. So, the Indian warriors had approached Custer to mutilate his body as well. The Indian women pleaded with them to leave Custer's body alone, and the warriors agreed to only cut off one of Custer's fingers. Now, what else did they do to him? You said earlier, and I said no, because you said they did it to Tom Custer. But
No,
they
I
actually
meant,
did it to George.
I meant,
What'd they do to him?
they punctured his eardrums.
They punctured his eardrums with sewing awls. And what the women did that. And sewing awls are like a needle, so to speak, made out of bone. That they used to sew, poked out both eardrums with sewing awls. Now I know Caleb was paying attention last year. Why'd they do that, Caleb?
Wasn't it so that he could hear better?
He could hear better in the afterlife, because remember, he had promised never ever again to attack the Cheyenne. And he did at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So the women poked out his eardrums, cleaned out his ears, so he could hear better in the afterlife and would keep his promises. So they cut off his finger, poked out his eardrums, other than the shooting he took. Okay? Otherwise, he looked like he was laying asleep. Now, historians have pondered for years, because nobody knows, and the Indian accounts are kind of not totally believable, but some of them are. There were three, and you need to know these, it'll be on your test, three possible reasons why Custer was not scalped or mutilated. Three reasons why historians believe his body was left alone. Why the Indian women talked the warriors out of mutilating him. Why they left his body alone.
Was one because they thought he was beautiful?
Okay, we'll get to those. Number one, many of the Indians never saw him in person. They only heard of it. What trademark set him apart, though? He cut it just before the campaign. Okay, not real short, but shorter than what they had imagined. So the first reason why historians believe they left him alone is they didn't recognize him. Okay? They'd never seen him before. They'd only heard of him. He had also been known for his long blonde hair. He cut it just before the campaign. So what's the reason? He was just one of the lucky ones, like Boston Custer, who didn't get scalped or mutilated. They didn't recognize him. I have a hard time with that one, but it's possible. It is possible. Okay, the second reason makes sense to me is because he was a military leader, big hero in the Civil War, commander of the 7th Cavalry, popular and out there in the media. They had respect for him, so they left his body alone out of respect for him as a military leader. That's somewhat believable, certainly. So, the Indian warriors had great respect for Custer. He was a military hero in the Great Civil War. They had heard of him as the head of the 7th Cavalry. They knew he was part of the 7th Cavalry, so they just left his body untouched out of respect. Certainly could have been the reason. The third reason has a little twist to it. Okay, and if you were watching the movie that we were watching, and we're going to watch the rest of it here later, one of the reasons why they left him alone and why the women were so insistent of leaving him alone is he was a family member of the Sioux.
Yeah, every time a child.
There you go, family member of the Sioux. And you were paying attention, weren't you? It was rumored, although never confirmed, that Custer had a sexual relationship with a Sioux woman prior to the campaign of 1876. Do you remember, anybody remember that clip in the movie when he kind of made eyes at that woman? And her name was Mayotsi. It's on your ID sheet, Mayotsi. And she had a baby in 1869. Okay? 7 years prior to this battle. Okay? Mayotsi had a baby. Obviously she didn't have an Indian or native boyfriend, so to speak. Or they didn't know one. Well, when that baby was born, it had creamy skin and yellow streaks in its hair. So they could tell she was a mixed baby. She had creamy skin, which means lighter skin than Native Americans, and also had yellow streaks in her hair. Most Native Americans have dark hair, right? And she had yellow streaks in it, blonde streaks. Yeah.
But didn't you say that Custer and his wife had like a really great relationship? Like a really great love?
Yeah, but dear, when you're on the plains for months at a time, men are pigs.
Okay,
Just keep that in mind.
So-
Yes.
fair enough.
If that was the case, Isaiah Dorman, wouldn't he have kind of gotten off the same thing basically? Like he wouldn't have been mutilated?
Well, because he was married to a Sioux woman?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was just you should never fight the Sioux if you're married to a Sioux woman. However, Isaiah Dorman was black and he was no part of any leadership quality. He wasn't well known. He was kind of there were Indians trying to rub the black off his face because they'd never seen anything like that. He could have been termed as a negative thing, you know what I mean? Okay, now here's the story. The child's name was Yellowbird. And she died at the age of 1. Only lived to be a year old and died. So, because of this relationship that Custer had with Mayotsi, and he bore a child, so to speak, with her, he was spared mutilization because he was considered family. Okay? Those are the 3 reasons why they think he was left alone. My opinion, which means as much as your opinion, I think more the respect of being a leader, or the fact that maybe they didn't recognize him, would be more often than that one. Now getting back to your question, Anna, not getting into a moral debate here, but in those days, guys that were married hired prostitutes all the time. In the bar, you're not hired, but paid them. I mean, that was a little different game because it was a rough life in the Western frontier, so I don't think fidelity was the most important thing on their mind, and then they were gone for a long time, and how that goes, yeah?
Mr. Earl was just telling us that, because when I asked him about this, he told me that why they didn't mutilate his body was because he found this thing.
Yeah, I think that's the historians, but there's some other, you gotta study them all, okay? Now, so, that'll take us to an important part that I like to go through, and that'll probably do it for the day. Arms used during the Battle of Little Bighorn. We're gonna talk about the arms used on both sides, and it'll tie into this archaeology, okay? And those pictures I gave you, okay? And you'll need to know the different types of this. It's kind of an interesting thing here, okay? Now, during that major archaeological dig we talked about in the 1980s, they really were able to find out a lot about the arms that were used in the battle. And it really was a key piece of evidence to try to put this thing together and get rid of some of the myths that we've talked about. They found unbelievably large amounts and different types of cartridges. Now here's what the Army was issued. I want you to kind of think about this. Let's talk about the 1873 Springfield Carbine. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So that's one weapon that the Army had, the 1873 Springfield Carbine. It was a single shot 45-70. And you're going to get a chance to shoot mine when you get on this trip. It was a 45-70.
Isn't that a pretty big gun?
It is. It's not a big gun, but the bullet is about this long, and about 80% of it is gunpowder and 20% of it's lead. It's a huge cartridge, and it kicks like a mule.
Nuts.
A mule. Yeah, you know. Anyway, they were trapdoor, which means they had, and I'll show you, they had to be opened up, and the bullet put in, shot, shoot. Open it up, the bullet should eject out, put another bullet in, shoot. Should. Well, what happened when they shot it many times, and it got hot, and they actually had to take their knives out and pry that brass out of there to get another shell in, which didn't do you much good when you were being attacked, so it was difficult, okay? Now, this was a very good weapon for distance. It had great accuracy at a large distance, and it also had great stopping power. If it hit you, you were done, okay? And it also, another thing that was very important, is it had twice the range of any other weapon anywhere on either side at the time. So it was great at distance shooting, it was very accurate, had great stopping power. If it hit you, you were going to go down, and it was something that was twice the distance. Now, I have two different 45-70s. One is an 1885 Cimarron, which was later, and I put a target out with open sights at 100 yards, and never shot it in my life, and I hit in a circle like this every time. They're unbelievably accurate once you get them where they need to be, okay? The other weapon we talked about was the Colt 45 pistol that the Army had during this battle. Simply a 6-round pistol, okay? But it wasn't, it wasn't, bang, 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 bang. You had to cock it, okay? Let's talk about the Native American weapons. You need to write these down, probably. You should know the other ones, but here's what the Native Americans had. And I gave you pictures of them, some of them. They had the Henry's repeating rifle. That's the one just like this. Put so many shells in, boom, boom, a lot quicker than digging the shells out, right? Okay? So they had a Henry repeating rifle, which you'll get to shoot if you go on the trip.
What caliber is that?
They were 45, 70s, and 30 types. They're different types. Okay? They also had the Sharps carbine and the Spencer carbine, which I gave you pictures of. I didn't give you a picture of a Colt open top 1872 model pistol. So they also had Colt pistols. A Colt 8 open top means that the bullets are put in differently than in the cylinder. Okay? So they had Henry repeating rifles, they had Sharps carbines, they had Spencer carbines, and they had what was called a Colt open top 1872 model pistol. Now those were the most notable ones we had. We know they had, okay? We know they had those. The thing about it, the thing you need to know, is they found 47 different types of ammunition cartridges when they did that dig. 47 different types. So we know the majority of it was a Henry repeating rifle or a Colt open top 1872 pistol or a Sharps carbine or Spencer carbine, but they also not only found ammunition from those 4 guns, how about 43 others included? So it tells you that the Warriors had they estimated over 200 multiple shot rifles that could fire 16 shots in the time it would take a soldier to reload that 45-70 once. And you wonder why it didn't last long? Let me repeat that. Indian Warriors had over 200 multiple shot rifles. Over 200 rifles in their possession that were multiple shot. You know, cock it, shoot, cock it, shoot. They could fire 16 shots. When you take a look at those 200 multiple shot rifles, they could fire 16 shots in the time it took a soldier to reload his weapon one time. 16 to 1 coming at you. How are you going to do? Especially when they have 2,000 warriors and you've got 200. I mean, you think about it. It was a turkey shoot from the very start. It wasn't even close. Now, the point I want to make as we quit today is when they were on the battlefield, how do they know they came out of these weapons? The way the firing pin strikes the cartridge. Some strike in the middle, some strike 1 on the side, some strike 2 on the side. Some strike in a different area. So when they did this dig and they got all these cartridges, they studied the firing pin impressions. And that's how they figured out there were 47 different type of weapons that the natives were shooting in that battle. That they had all accumulated either by stealing them or buying them at trading posts or finding them or whatever. So Custer, the point I'm making is, Custer never had a prayer. That didn't even count the arrows they were using. You know what I mean, or anything else. Now, what we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to talk about once the 7th Cavalry buried their dead and all that, their journey back to home. What was that like? We're going to talk about the journey. We're going to talk about how the nation responded. We're going to talk about the re-entering of most of these soldiers. None of the soldiers there today are still buried where those white markers are. They undid them all. They took them all out. And they put them in different areas. And we'll tell you tomorrow those areas they put them. Friday, I'm going to give you a review sheet that you're going to fill out and turn into the sub by the end of the period. I'm going to give that back to you on Monday. We're going to have a test on part 3 Tuesday. So your assignment, it will be graded, is to finish this review Friday, turn it into the sub, I'll grade it, give it back to you Monday, test Tuesday. Yep.
Are we likely to grade it?
Probably, yeah. Yep. Everything's on this, so. Yes, Isabella?
Is the review